Hello. This tutorial is to talk about a method to use when you are asked to prepare a high-level schedule where payments will be made when deliverables and/or milestones are reached. In this case, it is assumed that the costs associated with the resources and materials have already been estimated. Therefore, for the purpose of this type of schedule, it is not important if resources or materials are assigned. However, if they are, it is important that they do not have the rates associated with them attached to their budget, or it will skew, or in other words, distort the budgeted cost totals because their values will be added to the total. So let's get started. In this project that you see on the screen, there are 5 milestones. I can scroll down, you can see there are 5 different milestones on here. Each milestone has multiple deliverables that are required to complete in order to finish that particular milestone. So we're going to start at the top, and I'm going to show you my columns. If you notice, I have an activity ID column, and the activity ID column is what we call Smart ID. What I used here, and of course this is personal preference, I used MS to stand for milestone and DL for deliverable. So in this particular line that I've highlighted, MS is milestone 1, deliverable 1. And that just helps us if we're looking at a glance at the activity ID, we can tell what it represents. Okay. The next, the activity name, I just kept it very simple here. Either it's a milestone or it's a deliverable, 1, 2, 3, 4. Our start date, of course, in this example, we only have one start activity, and that's the actual contract start or the project start. Our finishes, if you notice, each of our milestones and deliverables are a finish milestone. And the reason why we did that is because the requirements for that deliverable to be met or for that milestone to complete will be a finish date. In this case, I added a column here for baseline finish, and we'll talk about that a little bit later because you'll want to be able to do a comparison. Variance, our variance is going to be the variance or the difference between our actual finish and our baseline finish. Over here, you can see original duration. In this case, our project, or in this case, our contract is 130 days. Percent complete, which I'm using physical percent complete. And then we come over here, our budgeted total cost, and then earn cost to date. Now, just let me demonstrate for you here with the columns. I changed the actual cost. It's actually actual cost. I changed to say earn cost to date. And if you notice, percent complete is actually physical percent complete. If you notice, you can come over here to edit column and you can change the titles of your columns. You can make them shorter. Sometimes we used OD for original duration. It just keeps your columns a little bit shorter. Okay, so that's how I came up with the columns. Let's go over here to the left, and I want to look at the WBS, the work breakdown structure. The way I created this is we have our project, see fixed cost, and over here, fixed cost high level schedule. I have one WBS that says fixed cost or the milestones, and then underneath it are sub WBSs for milestone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we come back over fixed cost details. If I wanted to provide more detail, I could put it in a separate WBS. The reason we do this is because we want our costs to roll up and summarize at the WBS level. So this will make a lot more sense when we get further in here. Let's go back to our activities. Okay. Now we'll come up here to group and sort. In order to get them to summarize at the WBS level, not only did I need to set up my WBS structure over here the way that I did, but if you notice under display options, you wanted to select show group totals. Okay, this is what actually causes it to roll up. And then we're going to group by the WBS level. In this case, it's indented. You don't necessarily have to do that. But so we're going to show group totals, WBS level. And then I come over here and sort. Under each WBS, I have it sorted by start date and then finish date in ascending orders. So this just goes to show you how we have grouped and sorted all of our activities. It just makes it easier to see, easier to do reports. So that is our basic layout. Of course, you might customize it however you see fit. You notice over here to the right, I have the Gantt chart, and I do have my relationship lines displayed. You may not want to see them, but you may also want to show your critical path. The other thing to note is that you can have interdependencies. See my relationships? In this case, I set up down here relationships, so I have my predecessor to the left and my successor over to the right. So we go from our contract start. And you can see it is going to be the predecessor to all the deliverables that are going to start under each milestone. And then each deliverable is going to have a predecessor and a successor. You may have ties between one, let's say milestone 1, deliverable 1, and milestone 2, deliverable 1. There may be a relationship. You may have to finish a deliverable under one of them. One milestone has to complete before you can go ahead and finish a deliverable under another milestone. So make sure you have all your logic ties, your lags, everything set in there that you want to do. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to expenses. This is where we're going to start adding in our fixed costs. Notice under this, and I've already done this schedule so that it just saves us a little bit of time, but if I come down here and you notice there's an add button. So you click on the add, and this is what you're going to do for our deliverable. And it says here, new expense item. If you notice this customized field, I can type in there. In this case, based on the contract that we received, when this deliverable for milestone 1 completes, there is an 85% payout. If it's delivered on time, there's an additional 2.5%. And then based on the contract, the quality of the deliverable, let's say it has to be it goes through no more than 2 reviews to maintain that quality, there's an additional 2.5. So for this particular deliverable, once it's complete, I can get a maximum of 90% of my total fixed cost for this particular deliverable. So there's a 10% that's remaining, okay? I suggest that you put your percent payout in here, and the reason why I suggest that is because if you start handling multiple projects and each contract might have a different payout, this just helps keep it straight. It makes it a little bit simpler. Our next column here is a cost account. Now, cost account is a code. You notice this is a code. So if I come over here, I may have to add. This is just showing current. See, I can filter by and look at all cost accounts. So before you even start this, you may have to go in there and add more codes. What if you have to do that? Well, the way you go up here is enterprise, cost accounts. And you can see here, then I can go ahead and add. I can delete ones if I don't need them anymore, merge. So this is where you'd want to put your cost account code. So go ahead and close that. It's not mandatory. This is an optional field. You'll see later when I show you a report how it can benefit you. Expense category. This is again another code. So I click in here, and you can see I have all these different options for expense categories. In this case, I put consulting. Okay, let's say you don't see the expense category that you want. The way you would add that, and you would need admin rights, is come up here under admin. Click on that, admin categories, and then come over here and see expense categories. Go to expense categories, and this is where you can go ahead and add the type of expense that you want to have in there, okay? So that's how you would add those 2 codes, and that's how you would go ahead and select them. The next line, if you notice, it defaults to uniform over the activity. You actually have 3 options: end of activity, start of activity, or uniform over the activity. In every place that I've worked, they did not accrue the cost until the end of activity. So we've always selected that. It's all going to be based on the accounting process that the company that you're working for is going to ask for. Okay. So in this case, end of activity, budgeted cost. Okay. You might have to get out your calculators, but in this case, the total fixed cost for this particular deliverable was $100,000. So 85% of that $100,000 is $85,000, and then you can see for another 2.5% for on time and quality is $2,500. Actual costs: once this deliverable is complete, you've received the invoice payout. You know how much was paid out for the delivered, on time, and quality. You will come back in here and manually enter this information in here, okay? And then you can see the remaining cost. In this case, since we don't have any actuals yet, the remaining cost is equal to the budgeted cost. At completion cost is also going to match unless, let's say, the actual cost ended up being more than what our budgeted, then the at completion cost will go ahead and reflect that. Our next column, vendor. This is custom. So you can see I can type in there. You might want to put a particular person's name. This is one way that you can assign this particular requirement to a person. In this case, I put down the vendor's name, the company, and you write that in there. Again, when we get to the report later in this session, you'll be able to see where that comes into play. Our last column, the only reason why I left this in here, because as you can see, you can customize your expense columns. I left this one in here because if you are working with a company that has the ability to import their financials into Primavera and you have this selected, it will automatically fill in your actual costs based on our codes that we have set up over here. So this is why the cost account code would have to match with whatever the company's cost accounting is. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to delete this column here. Okay, so we've talked about each deliverable. Now, what I recommend is that build your first deliverable and then do a copy paste each time, because if you don't, when you come down here, deliverable 2, you're going to have to click down here for add, and you're going to have to type in here delivered, blah, blah, blah. So do a copy paste of each deliverable, or you can even do a copy paste of a milestone. And then really all you have to do is go back in here and change your budgeted cost values. Okay. Hopefully I'm not going too fast, but as you can see, this is how you can do a budgeted. And as you enter the information, let's go in here just for example and say on this one, we've completed this 212500. I'm just showing you just so that you can see the difference on over here, our earned cost to date, which is our actual cost filled in. It rolled up, summarized at the WBS level right there. Okay. Down here, you can see your remaining cost went to 0, right? And that completion cost matched with the budgeted cost because it's the same. If I had put in here, let's say 220, notice remaining cost is 0, but that completion cost is higher, greater than our budgeted cost. And when we do the reports, that's going to be reflected. You'll see that later on. Okay, so that's just an example of how we can put those numbers in. Let's go back down to 0. Okay, everything's back to normal. So we have gone through the columns. We've added our cost to each and every activity. Okay. If you notice, for this finish, let's say milestone 1 finish. Let's look at the relationships. Okay. The last deliverable fed in there. When I completed deliverable 4 and a milestone 1, that meant I have completed all my deliverables. Now we're to our finish milestone. And you can see it feeds into, I have to finish milestone 1 before milestone 3 can finish. And then it also goes to our contract finish. So come over here to expenses. Notice this is a little bit different. Once I've met all my deliverables under a milestone, I have a finished milestone here that an additional 5%. Notice it says delivered 5%. Got my cost account, expense category, it's end of activity. And you have to do the calculation. So this is the 5% of each one of the deliverables above. And so that takes each deliverable now will be paid up to 95% of the total fixed cost for that particular deliverable. The total in this case, as you can see, is $41,250. Okay. So we've got that. So we have our milestones. So now we're only at 95%. How are we going to get to the very end? Well, when you finish this entire project, we come down here, contract finish, and I come over to expense. There's a final payout of 5%. So we're withholding money until the very end of this contract. And once that's complete, there will be a final 5% payout. End of activity. I didn't even bother with the expense code and expense category here. You can put that in there. And then the budgeted cost. So there's a $220,000 final payout. Just keep in mind, it is possible, let's say this was work that was done out in the field and there's a bonus. You might need to add another milestone that's going to be after your contract finish, that's going to be tied to, say, safety. It's a safety bonus. We had no incidents on site, and so we're going to get an additional $50,000 because of that. Okay, so you would need to add that in there. So we have added our cost to every single one. See, I go down, you can see how the values change. Okay. So we've done all that. Now, let's just go on and we've completed our schedule. The next thing that's very, very important, baseline. And the reason why I say that is because look at this. I've done relationships. I have done ties with lag in between each one of these deliverables. You notice my milestones are not constrained. Now that doesn't mean that you can't constrain them, but in this case, all I've done is I have deliverables that have lag between them. There are some companies that do not want you to use the constraints, and I'm sort of like in the middle. I like constraints, but at the same time, that if you used a mandatory constraint, it's going to lure you into thinking that you're safe when you're not. So if you're running behind schedule, that date's not going to move, and you're really not going to see. If all of them had mandatory constraints, you're not going to see that you have a negative lag or negative flow between your deliverables, okay? So in this case, I did not do that. So it's very important that you create a baseline. So we come up here, right? Maintain a baseline. You can see I added one in here. I like to put the date. I just put the date there and then with the schedule name. So I can just tell at a glance what when I created this baseline. It just makes it easier instead of having to go there and look down below. And then this one, if you notice, I said customer sign-off baseline. You have different options, okay? So depending on the type of baseline that if you just want to designate it. So I created that. Again, if you want to add names for the baselines, go to this admin categories. And those baseline types, initial planning baseline. So if you have the admin rights, you can go in there and you can add different types of baselines, and this is just a tool for you to be able to use. Okay. So once we've created the baseline, now we want to go back and we want to assign it. So I've assigned my fixed cost high level. This is my initial baseline. So I've selected it and it's there, okay? And that's why you can see up here with this column baseline finish. I have it in comparison. So if I deliver something early and my actual is an earlier date than my baseline, you'll be able to see with your variance that you are running ahead of schedule. It's a great tool for you to be able to use. If you decide to use your constraints, it's very, very important that you make sure you pay attention to float and still do a comparison with your baseline. Okay, let's go to how we can show some reports. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on print preview. And you can see this is probably very familiar to most of you. You have all your activities to the left and then your Gantt chart over to the right. Come here to our page setup. Page, I like tabloid. It just gives me a little bit more room. It all depends on what kind of space you have, how you're going to create a PDF, that type of thing. It's landscape. You can set up your margins, header, footer. In this case, I attached contract scheduler here. If you're going to add a picture, you want to come up here because this is the icon that's going to allow you to add a photo, okay? It's not going to be, you can't do a copy and paste and just put it in there. So just something to keep in mind. So come over here to options and notice activity table, all columns. If I deselected this, it's only going to show the columns that I had showing on my screen that we were looking at before. Grid lines and Gantt chart. Okay, so this is just a typical schedule. I don't think I'm showing you anything that you don't already know. So we say, okay. And here's our schedule. I did choose to keep my relationship lines because this is a very simple schedule. So it's not going to get a little bit too busy with all those lines in there and throwing people way off. Okay, so that's one way you can do a report. So if I were to come up here, I could go ahead then and print and create, Microsoft Print a PDF with properties, making sure that it also says that it's a tabloid, okay? So that's one. Let's come out of here. I created a second layout. I like to save my different layouts, so let's go to this next one. I'm going to say, no, I don't need to save this. Spreadsheet. This is going to be important. It's a nice spreadsheet. If you notice down here in the bottom, and the way I built this layout is I went here, layout, come down here, show on bottom, activity usage spreadsheet. Because we are basing it off of the activities, not off resources, but on the activities, okay? So activity usage spreadsheet. Then I want to come down here and over in this area, this lower right click, it says spreadsheet fields. And it's just like with any of our other fields where we have all these options, group and sort by. I'm just going to go through list. See, you have all these options that you can list over to the right. And right now, the only thing I have shown is cumulative budgeted total cost and budgeted total cost, because I'm really at the beginning of this project. And so I want to be able to just display. I want to minimize everything. I don't want too much clutter. Once you actually start this project and you're getting in there and you're receiving actuals, then you might want to go ahead and add your cumulative actual total costs and then actual total costs, okay? That's going to be important for you to put in there, but we're not at that point right now. Okay, so I've already added these in. Okay, now we'll come back up here, print preview, page setup. Come over here to the options. Of course, go through our same thing here with our margins, header, footer, page setup. And in this case, the only thing that you have checked off is spreadsheet. Okay, that's the only thing we have, spreadsheet. So we'll say okay. And if you look at this, what you have here is basically you're looking at it month to month. And you're looking at what you have your budgeted cost for each month. That's the bottom one. And then cumulative. So each month it's going to expand. It's going to become greater and greater and greater. And by the end of the project, the amount that's showing up here, okay, our cumulative should match our total fixed cost for this particular project. And I'll be honest with you, I made this project small enough so that all the months, July through January, fit on the screen, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to see. But this is a nice spreadsheet, okay? So, and you can see it does go to another page, the second page. You can make your rows maybe a little bit smaller, and you might be able to get it all on one page. And if you notice, I also like to put lines over here. If you're going to go into a meeting or if you're going to have a call, sometimes it makes it easier to just refer to the number over here to the left. So let me come out of this. And see, this is the number over here to the left. It's just a nice tool. And to add that, you come up here, see here, line numbers. That's just a nice feature to go ahead and put in there with reports. Okay, there's one other layout that I'd like to show you. And I can come back up here to print preview. Come here, options. And if I click here, Gantt chart, now you have the first report that we had with our activities to the left, our Gantt chart over here. In this case, I did not put the relationship lines. It's nice it has the WB as the bars for particular milestones, right? And then for the whole project up above. And then the bottom is our spreadsheet. So that's just another third option. And that's the only thing I did was on the options tab is just make a little change there, right? Or if I take this away in the Gantt chart, there we are, we're back to our spreadsheet. Okay, so we've done a couple layouts. There's just one report I want to show you. So if we come over here to the left, reports, and scroll down, see if I come all the way to the top, right? You can create reports on your own. Primavera is kind enough to put some that are just generic that they put together. And in this case, we're going to use one of theirs. So you scroll down underneath cost, report group cost, and you notice EX01 activity expenses. Okay, it's a global, right? That means it can be used for anything. Right click, run, report, and it takes you to the screen. So it says send report to either print preview, directly to printer, an email attachment, or an HTML file. I always like to see what my report's going to look like first. So I always tend to go print preview, select OK. When I do this, if you notice, it says page 1 of 10. Now, I just know this because I know what's going to be in this report, that it's because of the size of my paper. So I'm going to come up here, page setup, and notice it was on letter. I'm going to change it to legal. Once I change it to legal, you'll see the difference. And there we go. Now we're down to 5 pages. It has all of the columns. What I like about this is for each of the milestone deliverables, you notice this is milestone 1, deliverable 1, and I can see the breakdown, the delivered, on time, quality. I can see here my activity name. I see the expense category. I see the cost accounting. I see the column here for the vendor, our budgeted, our actual, remaining, and then over budget. Remember that one that I put 220? If I put 220 and it was over, then this would say it was, yes, it was over budget. And then we can scroll down. You can see each page. It's just a nice report that you can, and then we have our total. So you'll be able to see what you budgeted, you'll be able to see your actual, and then if there's any remaining. In this case, we haven't paid anything, so we expect it to look like that. So that is a nice report that Primavera has prepared for us. We don't even have to do that on our own. I'm gonna come back here to activities. So this concludes our session for how to build a high-level fixed cost schedule. If you have any questions or you have feedback or suggestions for future topics, please do not hesitate to contact us at Contract Scheduler. Our email is info@contractscheduler.com. And again, we look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you learned something from this session. Thank you.